Thank you very much. First, let me say how happy I am to be here myself, that we finally got this done. And how happy I am to be here with all of you who work so hard to make it happen. I think a statewide water plan can sound like a pretty dry subject. But there is an element of excitement in this one. And the element of excitement is actually because this particular statewide planning effort is really a citizen-led planning effort. In 2002, in the middle of a drought, which I'm sure made passage of the legislation much easier, we passed Act 220, thus constituting the statewide water committee and the regional water committees. And what was interesting about that was the act itself required that we assemble a veritable Chinese menu of people from across the Commonwealth to do the planning effort. And I also want to acknowledge here the help that we got in passing the legislation from then Secretary of DEP Dave Hess, who is a big proponent of water planning and water resources management. And it was helpful to get it passed. But once we got it passed, that's where you all came into this. Because the act required that we have on the committees, water companies, hydrogeologists, lawyers, local government, landscapers, sportsmen, environmentalists, well drillers, farmers, and one from every walk of life practically. It was actually not easy to fill all of the slots. But eventually we had 169 volunteers working statewide across the Commonwealth, and you know who you are, to put this plan together. It really was a citizen-led planning effort. I myself was appointed because I used to be a solicitor for a water authority and therefore understood something about water law. Anyway, along the way, this citizen-led effort, with great support from the staff at the Department of Environmental Protection, who really helped us very much, came up with this statewide water plan that we are issuing today. In order to do that, we also came up with some things that had never been done before in Pennsylvania. For example, we have approved a web-based water monitoring tool that we all had a hand in creating that allows us to ascertain, what water we have in the Commonwealth, where it's coming from, where we're lacking in water, once it is applied to a watershed. More importantly, we truth tested that tool by bringing it to the regional committee and the statewide committee, who understood the watershed and said to them, is this an accurate picture of what we have out there? And we refined the tool until we were able to show that it was. Now, plug here for Dave Mandelbaum. Where are you, Dave? And Don. We had lawyers on our committee whose hourly rates would have been unaffordable by the Commonwealth, freely donating their time and helping us very much. Hours and hours on conference calls to go over wordsmithing certain paragraphs to make sure that we were accurately reflecting the sentiments of the statewide committee and the Delaware Regional Committee. We had engineers, hydrogeologists, well drillers. All of those points of view of the citizens of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania are reflected in this plan and the web-based components that will shortly be up and running, and which I think will be very helpful in the coming years. So, we learned a lot about water in the Commonwealth during this process too. I think we can all agree to that. I see many members of the committees that are here. We began to understand things like flooding and stormwater are terrible things, but can be tremendous opportunities. Think, for example, of encouraging groundwater recharge where the water hits the ground as a way of managing stormwater and flooding and putting the water back in the ground where we need it to be. We clearly understood that Pennsylvania needs to begin making integrated decisions about water. which it is not currently making. Flooding is handled in one department. Stormwater is actually handled in another department than flooding. Land use decisions are made by an entirely different group of people than the people who are making the water decisions. We understood that that is not the way that we should be handling this resource that the Commonwealth has in great abundance and which is very important to us. Dealing with water withdrawals in a vacuum that did not consider existing or future land uses in surrounding communities is a problem. It is not the way to go, and we're going to have to address that as we go forward. The good news is technology exists to make these decisions easier. We can do computer mapping, we can use the technologies and models to show how water works, to help us make better decisions in the future with our water resources. We also came to realize that the concerns are different across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The concerns in the Susquehanna Basin, in fact, the concerns in the lower Susquehanna are different from the concerns in the upper Susquehanna. The concerns in the Great Lakes regions differ greatly from the things that concern people in this area in southeastern Pennsylvania. Therefore, we respect the work of the regional committees, and we understand that the statewide water committee has to depend on the regional committees to advance priorities that are important and different from one region to another. What was our task? Well, Act 220 is a very long piece of legislation, but our basic task was to make a fair inventory of the water resources in the state and then make recommendations as to how we should handle those resources in the future. By the way, even the issues that we were dealing with changed during the course of the planning process. 5 years ago, most of us had never heard of the Marcellus Shale. Now we know that the Marcellus Shale involves water as well as natural gas, and we need to deal with that issue in the future. Ultimately, what we realized was that, that the regional priorities are important for each region. In other words, not subsumed within the statewide water plan, but worthy in and of themselves to be dealt with to help the regions deal with their water issues. For example, in the southeast, with land development pressures exacerbating flooding and stormwater issues, we were quickly told and often reminded that we need legislation in Pennsylvania that will link land use decisions and water use decisions. We need a better way of integrating those two concepts. At the same time, we have to worry about the quality of water in many parts of the state, where historic legacies of industry that use water have left the water in less than enviable condition and that we need to clean up. We learned some very basic things about well drilling that I didn't know, and I'm sure many other people didn't know. Did you know if you drill a water well badly, you can actually pollute the aquifer from which it is drawing the water? This is important in the public interest, as well as in the interest of the landowners who are having wells drilled. So it's a priority for the statewide plan that we do something about regulating water drilling so that we make sure that it is done in a way that is sustainable for the aquifer, which feeds the public interest and the public drinking water. We also came to understand that we have responsibilities to other states, that we are part of compacts in the Great Lakes region, that what we do in Pennsylvania affects oysters in the Chesapeake Bay. And we have to take responsibility for dealing with those issues. The plan has specific legislative priorities. As I discussed, it has a specific legislative priority that we enact new legislation to establish water well drilling standards, and that we deal with that issue now because it is a public interest issue, not an issue between a landowner and the particular well driller.